Ink up, slow down, write your rhythm with Script and Scribe. Hi everyone, welcome back to Script and Scribe, and today we're doing some swatching in this Wearingeul color swatch book, as well as the Muji book. And you will be happy to know that I found my cocktail spoons, so I'll be able to do the swatches a lot easier than I did my last swatch video. They are super affordable, like £2 on Shein, Temu, AliExpress, and I use the back of them to pop into the actual bottle, and then you can transfer the ink onto your page and flatten it with the bowl of the spoon. So very handy. And £2, by the way, is like $2.75. I've seen them on Amazon too for a little bit more. I'm going to start by prepping this Muji high quality paper notebook and just putting the title in with the Pilot parallel pen. So 9 Diamine favorites. These are my 9 favorites and I'd love to hear about yours. Today I feel like doing the swatches in circles, so we're going to lay down 9 circles here using a pigment pen so that it doesn't smudge when I put the swatches in there. You can use any brand, this just happens to be a Pilot pen with a 0.5 width. I'm just writing the tools out over here in case it's a useful reference for anyone. Like I say, you don't have to stick to the brands. And of course, I'll also put these down in the video description. I try to share stuff for every budget on this channel, so just a reminder, Wearingeul is £17 for 40 pages on the swatch book, and this Muji notebook is actually £4.95 for the same number of pages, but it is slightly smaller. If you want a same size comparison, it is £6.95. But that said, you do already have all of the bottles printed in for you on the Wearingeul. And we're about to do the swatches, so you'll be able to do a comparison of which one you think performed better with each of the inks. Diamine is one of the more affordable fountain pen inks, especially here in the UK, with a huge range of colours and different price points as well. It's a long-established British ink manufacturer founded in Liverpool in 1864 and is still family run. Recently, they've also expanded into pigment inks with the Forever range, which are permanent and waterproof, but still designed to be fountain pen friendly. Starting with Celadon Cat, this is actually a community designed ink created in collaboration with the Reddit fountain pen community. And just a bit of slightly interesting background, it almost didn't make it to our shelves because Diamine decided to make it since it lost out by just 2%, and the actual winner that year was Sailor's Warning, which has now been rebranded as Red Sky. Now this here is a pale muted soft green grey ink, and I have to say it's sort of popping on this Wearingeul, and I'm wondering if that muted quality is going to come through later as it dries. So I'm used to seeing it in the writing and it's definitely muted, but yeah, it's looking quite bright even on the Muji. I like the tonal variation. This one's got lovely shading, so I tend to use it in a stub, which is good because when I use it in extra fine nibs, it's a little bit pale. So I'm just using the bowl of the spoon to lift the ink a bit, and there you can see the lighter quality, and that's sort of the color that you get in a fine nib, and the darker bits in the broader nibs. So I had to pause for 2 minutes to find this glass dip pen, and while I did, you can see on the page in the background that the ink really started to dry. I mean, I wasn't gone for ages. So this is a fast drying ink, which I like for journaling because then I don't smudge on the page. I'm not going to do any lengthy writing samples, but I think just doing this little bit is actually already going to show us the tonal shift or the shading that happens with this ink. The next one isn't a huge contrast to Celadon Cat. It's not like the opposite colorway. It's Eau de Nil, but it does show, I suppose, that I do lean towards slightly desaturated colors. And this is a desaturated teal, but a little bit more dusky and moody. So yeah, I do like my moody inks. I feel like it belongs in the teal family, but it does not remind me of the Eau de Nil or the Water of the Nile of the 1800s. That color is a sort of light, muted green, and I'll show it on screen. But either way, this is still one of my favorite inks. I'm just not sure about the naming convention. The original Eau de Nil, I think, is closer to this hex code A7B484, but that's just me being pedantic. And if you want to see it in live action, it is in the Birds. Tippy Hedron's dress is Eau de Nil. I'm using a glass dip pen again to write out the name of the ink for a little writing sample. And this time we're going to see again some shading, but not as much as with Celadon Cat, because this one is darker. And the quality of the ink is also very different. It is a much more wet leaning ink rather than what we just had with Celadon Cat. I'm making sure to distribute the ink further back onto the pen so that we've got a better flow, which I didn't do with Celadon Cat. Now, I find this a really well behaved ink, and when it's drying, I'm expecting to see a little bit of sheen, unlike with the first one, which is just all about shading. This one has both shading and sometimes sheen. You may be happy to know that the next one is not blue or green leaning. It is dragon's blood. And this one has a slightly brown leaning red, a nice deep color. It is more muted, of course, than a typical bright red because I do lean muted. And you can see the richness straight away in there. So I love the shimmer as you see it sort of shifting off from the bottom. I always try and do the gentle swirling that's recommended, but somehow that doesn't shift it and I end up having to shake it a lot more than is recommended, I guess. Just going to speed this up. And by the time I'm finished doing all that, we have got tons and tons of bubbles, which I do not think you're supposed to have. But it is the only way that I seem to get the shimmer to lift off here. And for good measure, let's just give it a good stir as well. You can see a lot of the dry gold particles around the bottle rim, and then that will come out in the swatch. But one thing that I was always surprised about is when I do the dots, they look really dark, but of course the actual ink is less dark. So it is not a burgundy red. It is very much leaning into the warm brown side of a red color. So not like Diamine, Oxblood, or Writer's Blood, for example. Now, the only time that this wonderful shading that we're seeing in the swatch comes out when I'm writing is with a dip pen with a poster nib, like a really wide nib. But with a regular nib or even a stub, I don't get that much shading, but I do get a lot of the shimmer. So what I notice here with the first three, other than these are the sort of colors that I usually go for, is the performance on paper. Even while still wet, these swatches are showing a lot more variation from lightest to darkest in the ink on the Muji paper compared to the Wearingeul, and we'll see what that looks like with other inks and when everything is dry. Next up is Lady Grey, and I loved this color straight away, and I was so glad that I did because I got this big bottle of it. I bought Colosseum in a big bottle and do not love it. So yeah, don't make that mistake. Try the small ones first. But Lady Grey was an absolute success. This is soft muted purple grey, but when I lay it down, that's what you see. And then as it begins to dry, you'll see some pink undertones. And Lady Grey is another ink that was developed with the Reddit fountain pen community. So mini spoiler alert without going into details. I think I have got 3 that were developed with the Reddit fountain pen community. So we looked earlier at Celadon Cat, and now we've got this Lady Grey. I think it's the most multi-tonal in my lineup, and you can already see that when it's wet. And then as it dries, that quality really comes out even more, the variation in the colors and the undertones. It is sort of wet leaning, but not overly so. And again, you can see that in terms of the dry time as we go on to do the next ones. But first, I'll do the writing sample. I don't find that a lot of the complexity comes out when using a fine nib, which is pretty much like this very fine point that I have on this glass dip pen. You don't see the complexity, you just see that it's a nice legible color. But with a stub, you do get the multi-tonal variation, fantastic shading. Next up, we have another teal color in the shape of Aurora Borealis, but I decided to sort of place it underneath Eau de Nil on the Wearingeul swatch book so that we can sort of compare and contrast. I feel like while they're both teal leaning, this one is more towards the green spectrum than Eau de Nil. And it also, to me, feels bolder. And there's going to be something different about it because it is not just about shading. It is actually going to have some sheen. It has a nice smooth flow, and again, it is one of the ones that I prefer using in a broader nib or a stub nib. But if you like your fine nibs, then the base color itself shows really lovely, and you can see that with how I'm writing with this dip pen right now. So that is the way it would look in a finer sort of nib. And we're moving on to the second page of the Muji notebook for the next sample, and just lining things up with the camera for Writer's Blood. And this is the one I was hinting at, that this is another Reddit fountain pen community collaboration development with Diamine. So I think that the three that I mentioned, Celadon Cat, Lady Grey, and this Writer's Blood, are the only 3 of my 9 that were developed with the Reddit community. But let me know in the comments if you know otherwise. Perhaps I've got 4. I decided as well to place this underneath the other red that we've got today. Obviously not on the Muji. The Muji is sitting there happily on its own with the Writer's Blood. But here, we've got the Dragon Blood above, and now I'm smushing down the Writer's Blood. And I wanted to compare and contrast these 2 different reds, the Dragon Blood and the Writer's Blood. And it will show that Writer's Blood is more burgundy leaning, so it has the purple undertones that keep it from having the warmth that we see in Dragon Blood. Rather than that extravagant gold shimmer in Dragon Blood, I'm expecting to see a subtle shimmer in both the samples on the Muji and on the Wearingeul in terms of this, really subtle sheen. And with those 3 down, what strikes me is that the tonal variation of Lady Grey is coming through really well on the Muji and the Wearingeul, and I'm surprised by how much on the Wearingeul. Now, I very nearly picked a different shade of purple to Monboddo's hat, but I have been using this a lot lately, and I thought one of you had recommended this to me, so I had a look through my 9 favorite purple inks, but I couldn't find out who actually recommended it. So yeah, it was a close one together with Diamine Passion Flower, which is from their Forever range, one of their pigment inks, and is a very different purple. This one is a lot darker. In fact, it is my darkest purple. A sort of dusky violet, and if we're very lucky, when it dries, we're going to see a sort of subtle olive gold or yellowish green sheen develop, but I don't always have that happen. It was created with the Fountain Pens UK Facebook group in 2019, and it's a pretty fast drying ink, so I really like it for journaling. So ink number 8 just drives home how many favorite Diamine inks I have, because I was torn between this particular Autumn Oak and Ancient Copper, and I was into Ancient Copper a far lot more than this one last year, but now I'm somehow leaning towards this one. So, ask me in 2027 and I'll probably have shifted back to Ancient Copper. Autumn Oak is this really balanced mix of warm orange, amber, and golden brown. So obviously perfect for autumn, as the name suggests. It has dramatic shading as well, and I'm hoping that comes out on both papers, because sometimes the orange brown in it tends to pool in wetter areas. So I'm going to give it the opportunity to do that, and fingers crossed we see it. It's a fairly light color for the palette that I go for, and yet really legible even in a fine nib, as you can see with this dip pen. And my final ink is one of my absolute, well, okay, this is my favorite. It is my favorite Diamine ink, hands down. And it sheens, it shimmers, and it's, yeah, it does everything. And it looks great when I write with it in a stub or even with a medium nib. It has all of the effects that you see in the swatch, but sometimes even better because somehow it does this outline to the lettering. So yeah, anyway, this is, like I say, my favorite, and I'm trying to show you the skulls, but they do this thing of hiding. They're supposed to agitate all of the shimmer at the bottom so that you get a really well mixed ink. And they do that great, but then they're hiding. I have managed to get a really good photo of them before. I'll try and poke them a couple more times just to show you what they look like. And maybe, no. Okay, so here's an earlier image of the plastic skull in there. But I would be into this ink even without the skulls in the bottle. It's one of the exclusive for the cult pen shop here in the UK and has a wonderfully dramatic look. Now, they describe it as having a deep plum purple base and a a ghastly green sheen overlay. And I suppose that's accurate. But I mean, I just think it's gorgeous rather than ghastly. But it definitely leaned into the Halloween theme when it came out. Now, the other thing that sets this apart, other than it having both sheen, shimmer, and different effects compared to my other inks that I'm showing here, is that it is a lot juicier. So the others have all been fairly dry or moderate, and this one is a very wet ink. So I do tend to, when I forget, smudge a little. And that hasn't stopped it from being my absolute favorite just because of the effect. And I simply have to remind myself when I'm writing not to do my thing of resting my hand heavily on the page as I'm writing and then sort of like perhaps smearing the upper or lower line as I move across. And now we look at the dry ones. So Celadon Cat, totally dry on the Muji, and you can see very light and very dark variation. And this is what it looks like on the Wearingeul. Slightly less dramatic, but you definitely get the shading in there as well. Eau de Nil has a good amount of shading on the Muji and nice and legible in terms of the writing. You don't really see the shading in a fine line like this. But let's move on to the Wearingeul, and you'll see that again, we've got some shading, but it's not as dramatic. It's, yeah, you see it mostly on the edges. It's sort of like darker lined edges in the swatch. And then Dragon's Blood, definitely seeing the gold now, which took a while. So I wasn't seeing it when it was wet, and this is on the Muji. And you also see the shading, so it looks lovely. I'm not seeing the gold in the writing on the camera, but it does show in reality. And the gold effect is even more stunning on the Wearingeul, and it shows a lot of dark edges on the shading. And again, in the writing, I can see it on the page, but you can't see it here. And it's no surprise to me that Lady Grey looks so stunning with all of the variation here with the undertones of pink and then the deeper dark purple edges as well that come in. So what I wasn't expecting is how dramatic it looks on the Wearingeul. I think it looks stunning. But like I say, it is one of those inks that always allows you to see more and more in it. Aurora Borealis. Again, you got some shading. It's not as dramatic. And we've got some sheen, but it's not very clear on camera. Those dark spots of ink have got edges of sheen on there. And perhaps it's a bit clearer here. Yes, you can see the sheen on this Wearingeul. It's a really lovely red that contrasts with the teal color. The writer's blood shading is really clear on the Muji, but less so the sheen, which is a sort of copper. You only see it towards the left in that dark patch there. And on the Wearingeul, I definitely see more, but I can't seem to catch the light right with this camera. But you see the sheen at the top. We do have some sheen showing in Monboddo's hat, which is that sort of like yellow leaning, greeny olive gold. I don't know. But it just, yeah, it looks really good. I just wish there was more of it on the Muji. And again, you can see it on the Wearingeul, but somehow not as clearly. Now, the shading in Autumn Oak isn't looking spectacular on the Muji, but it did start making me think about the last swatching that I did for the Wearingeul inks on this Muji and on the Wearingeul. And there, the Wearingeul inks performed better on Muji than Wearingeul. But here, Diamine inks perform better on the Wearingeul than on the Muji. Does that make sense? I don't know. And of course, I make that declaration of all of the Diamine inks look so much better on the Wearingeul this time rather than the Muji. And immediately, the Deadly Nightshade looks spectacular on the Muji. Even in the writing, you get the sheening and the shading and everything. And so that makes it an outlier, I guess. But here we go. It still looks good on the Wearingeul, but I do think the Muji this time has the edge. So anyway, yeah, what can I say? Let me know what you think in the comments. And here's the zoomed out overhead shot. And immediately it's a struggle to see the shimmer in Dragon Blood. But anyway, it gives you an idea of how they all look together and also how they look on different papers. So these are currently my 9 favorite Diamine inks. Do let me know in the comments if I've got any overlap with you. Are any of these your favorites? And are any of them the ones that you loathe? And yeah, just let me know what colors you enjoy from Diamine, or if it's a brand that you want to get into but haven't tried yet. Thanks so much for joining me, and take care.